we go. Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Mat Chat, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Pleased to be joined today by the assistant coach from your Iowa State University Cyclones, Derek St. John. Derek, thanks for coming back on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So first I want to know, did you put $20 on you guys to win the dual meet title at the beginning of the year? Because I think you could have got good odds on that.
Man, if you could bet on it, maybe. But we knew we were going to be in for a battle still. That's a heck of a team we battled that last duel last Wednesday. So
you guys have had, we'll start with that, kind of work backwards. But the season this year, I think you guys have really been under the radar, right? I mean, and like we do the rankings every week, but we're still not like, did you guys maybe feel a little disrespected this year as it's gone on?
I mean, you always want to be considered, one of them top level programs, but I mean, disrespected, maybe not so much. You got to kind of earn those things a little bit. And we felt like maybe we hadn't quite earned it yet. We're starting to put ourselves up there a little bit now. But, we were last couple seasons, especially, we've had a lot of guys move in and out of lineups. And especially this year, we're finally, compared to the previous couple, we've actually had a solid lineup all year. And that's kind of, I feel like, helped us really get some momentum behind us and get us to where we're at, too.
Well, you guys have had a ton of really close duels. Like I didn't watch this, I saw the results of the UNI duel, which was 5-5. And when we preview duels, people get all hung up in the bonus, but if you can't win 5 matches, you're probably not going to win the duel. You got to figure out a way to win 5.
Right.
The Mizzou duel, obviously, I'm close to that program, was the night before state. So, there's probably a big crowd down there, a lot of high school t-shirts down there, right?
A lot of high school kids, ton of coaches and, athletes. It was a good atmosphere. It was a good showing. So it was exciting to compete in front of.
Yeah. So but you guys have a ton of these where guys sort of take turns in pulling it out, like Rocky Elam was in my event, he won a junior world title, really good wrestler, is in that handful of guys that are the favorite at 97. Now that weight class is really pretty wide open. You're a guy who still doesn't really know how to wrestle on the mat very well, but showed so much heart in the third period. But what was interesting watching him, and tell me if you see it, you're his coach, but he looked exhausted the whole time while he was pushing himself. Like, it's just like, I'm tired, but I'm going to try to make him more tired. Is that his mentality?
Yeah. And his style of wrestling, he likes to pick guys up. He likes to slam them down. He has an exciting style of wrestling. And, guys that wrestle like that, you usually see it in spurts. He's still trying to figure out that happy medium of, trying to consistently keep a pace throughout a whole match and not just, blowing the load in 1 or 2, scrambles or whatnot. And he came ready to go. That was one of his first matches that he've ever had was against Elam last year. And he didn't have a clue what he was doing. He kind of got thrown to the wolves by he did get completely thrown to the wolves.
Yeah.
He hadn't wrestled a single folk style match in his whole life. He went out there and he hit Elam in what would be in freestyle, like 4 4-point moves. The match would have been over in probably 30 or 40 seconds, right? So he went out there and he did that and he completely juiced himself, right? So maybe that in the back of his mind a little bit took a little out of him, but he did find a way to get it done. And Elam's no slouch. That dude knows how to wrestle. He's tough. He's good at hand fighting. He's good at riding, and he's got really heavy hips. And Younger struggled early, but once he smelt blood a little bit, like that guy was starting to retreat, he really turned it on. And he's a competitor. He likes to find ways to win.
Yeah. So, it kind of brought something up. It's like one of my buddies, he's now the coach of Wyoming Seminary, Cornell Robinson. He wrestled for us at Merrimack in college. We were his college coaches, and we'd go watch a lot of international meets together and talk. And he said, like the Japanese style is very flowing and not real physical and just kind of use your momentum against you. And he said, like the Cubans, it's all, not all, but majority of it is big explosive movements, like stand still, kind of slow the match down, and then boom, get in on you. And college wrestling is really sort of the opposite of that, right? Like, especially like your style, you were, at least I saw you as a guy who's a grinder, like always on the guy's head, never let him breathe, stepping backward, getting them to step backwards. How much of it is a philosophical change coaching a guy like that, explaining to him, like, this is maybe the more successful way to win in collegiate?
That's where I think you got to have perspective and open-mindedness a little bit, because you got to find that happy medium. Like I don't think you're going to be able to ever completely change his style of wrestling. Like that's always.
I probably don't want to, right?
No, I think it's great. The fans love it. He's having extreme success with it. Like he's beat some really good guys this year, right? So yeah. I don't want to completely change that, and nor do the other coaches. You want to keep that, but like you said, like that Cuban style is maybe more towards just developing straight athletes and explosive movements. But I think we've done a pretty good job with him of like some match strategy, whatnot, and continuing to develop his shape. I think that was a big thing. He never really had to grind out a match. He wrestled at the Junior Worlds and whatnot. He's been at the highest level freestyle wise and beat some, like he wrestled Kevin Gatson several years ago when he was still like 17 years old, 18 years old. So, just continuing to find that baseline shape and, like I said, find some kind of strategy that you can not last a 7-minute match, but you can continue to score points and, rally, get it rallied in your favor.
Yeah. I mean, it was just an impressive match, and it was a match you guys had to have, right? Like, you had to have one of those last two. And obviously, Mizzou's the favorite at heavyweight. And so, I mean, I guess on paper they were favored at both those weights, but the oldest saying in the book, that's why they wrestle the matches, right? So, and the other interesting thing in that duel was you guys really had the better of the action at 125. You were in on more of the shots, you were closer to scoring. And we, like, a lot of times we call it conversion ratio. Like you guys were like 0 for 4 and he was 1 for 1, and so that'll be interesting when you're making adjustments for the Big 12s, coaching that stuff up, right?
Yeah, 100%. You think of a team like Missouri too, they're known for being kind of funky and liking to scramble and that really good in the counter offense stuff. So we knew that going into it. And, just thinking about Kyson Turkina, he was in on the legs like 5-6 times, I believe, and didn't finish a single one, and that's kind of what's happened to him here the last, couple of matches that he's dropped is he took Teskey down probably 2-3 times and then got kind of funked. I mean, he was winning that match. He just dropped another one recently. I'm kind of blanking on it a little bit, but he's been in my opinion, the more dominant wrestler in like all of his matches, and just has yet to make those fine adjustments to, tweak them coming into this postseason, hopefully, and that'll be his edge a little bit more.
Yeah. So you and I were talking off the air about, you've been traveling and I've had a chance to travel some. Like I was at the Iowa Penn State match, and like I watched the RBY DeSanto match, and DeSanto's in like 7-8 times. And RBY's in once. And I think like anybody's ever coached, like if you're any sort of decent coach, like that guy's got to finish, right? Like, I mean, I don't think you need a PhD in coaching. You're just like, hey, like the first half is not the problem. It's the second half, right? So, but you're doing this at the highest level. We have a ton of guys and gals that are coaches and athletes that watch this. So I know they have these drills like easy in, hard out, hard in, easy out, all these different ways of doing it. How much of it, especially like at this point of the year, are you working with individual guys and saying, hey, David, you're doing a great job getting to your sweep single, but you're not finishing. So are you asking like, hey, why are you pausing? What are you trying to do? Are you working on specific finishes? Is it more just patting them on the back and be confident with them? Like, walk me through that. Cause I'm a guy that loves to nerd out about technique.
Yeah. From my perspective, and you're struggling in certain areas like Turkey, he's in on a single leg like 3 times. We're gonna put him in there, and at this point in the year, the biggest body of work's done, right? So it's all about fine tuning things, right? If you don't have that base shape, it's going to be really tough to get in really good shape, here in 2 weeks when you're going into your Big 12s, right? So as long as you have that base, I think, it's just all about fine tuning, keeping things short. And then technically that's where we come in the mornings, twice a week, maybe once a week, depending on the week, where you just put those guys in those positions and, you have them spar it out, or you're just working real slow technique, just trying to learn those things. But a lot of, when you're to this point in the season, you've done a lot of those things. So a lot of it just comes, I think, going in there, going slow, having somebody give them a light feel, and then just continually just rep it out a little bit more, and get yourself feeling really good in those positions and let her rip,
Yeah. It feels like, like I watched a lot of wrestling this weekend. It was I didn't watch the Iowa State tournament, but I know it was this weekend. I watched a ton of the Missouri State tournament, watched 2 duels yesterday, called the duel Friday night, watched a ton of matches. And kind of in general, it just feels like there's so many guys that are so close this year. Like, like it feels like maybe like the number 5 guy and the number 16 guy are like, in some weight classes, are like 1 scramble apart, not like a 6-point scramble, but like a +2, -2 kind of thing. And it feels like it's all finishing clean, hanging on, all these little tweaks. Like, is that a conscious effort? You talk to your team about that? Like, you got to figure out, it's going to be close, and here's some specific, I don't want you to give away, the magic potion, but talking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. The mentality is, you always want to go out there and you're working towards bonus points, right? Like,
sure.
Realistically, that's not going to be the case all the time. So, when you're just kind of strategically talking, you're going to be in for a dogfight. So be ready for it. Technically, sharp wrestling, clean wrestling is, efficient, and it's a lot less work usually in the end, right? So we talk about that quite a bit, but, just we talk and preach to our guys about just be ready for a dogfight, be ready for that scramble, be ready to get tired, because you're going to get tired. I don't care how good a shape you're in, you're going to feel it, right? And just being able to live and be comfortable, feeling all those things, feeling the emotion and learning how to deal with it, feeling maybe the crunch of your shape a little bit, or, the crowd too, goes into a lot of that emotion part, but just learning how to deal with those things. And it's nice when you go into like a Missouri environment and a UNI environment and an Oklahoma State environment, and you see your guys, they get to feel that, and then you see how they deal with it. And then once you get into it 2-3 times, how they adjust and feel more comfortable with it, it really helps, I think, going into this postseason too. So being able to put your guys in those environments helps a lot.
Yeah, I think those big duels, like you said, especially those road duels, where it's hostile, because like Big 12s are in Tulsa. That's going to be an OU crowd primarily. Obviously, right? Like, I actually talked to the Tulsa sports commissioner guy. Mizzou is invading. They said, like, the hotels are gone. The ticket sales are up dramatically, which is great. It wasn't that long ago where the Big 12 was like a 4-team quad, and, technically didn't even have an official automatic NAQ for it to grow to this and be 2 days and be on ESPN and everything else. And, that Saturday night feel, the walking out with the, the smoke and fire, that's a good, I guess, dress rehearsal, right? Like, get used to it kind of thing,
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, once you feel it, it changes. You get more comfortable the more time you've been there, especially as you get older in your careers, you become sophomore, junior, senior, but it's important, I went through that Big Ten, schedule, and went through the Big Ten tournament. Shoot, that's like a mini nationals. And then you walk into another extreme, the next, a week and a half later. So I think, the Big 12 is going in a good direction here where you get more of that replicated feel and you get more allocation. So it makes it tougher, and you get the fans there because it's exciting to watch because it is competitive, right? So I think that's huge, huge, huge.
Well, the tournament this year is going to be insane in terms of team race. Like, we're actually going to do a live version of this podcast on Friday afternoon from one of the local bars down there and kind of map it out, like put the seeds up and, do like an ESPN game day kind of preview show. When we're done, I need Nate Senior's number. I want him to come on as a guest. So, because we're trying to get one guest from, and I've known Nate forever. He knows my dad, so I want to get him to come on. And he's a good public speaker, so he'll probably crush it. So,
he's unbelievable.
Was your guys? I mean, I'm guessing you have multiple goals, right? As it, you have to set goals. You're not going to achieve them. I would assume dual meet title and team tournament. The tournament title. Those are two of the team's goals. It's like. Is that on a wall? Are you guys talking to them about it a lot? Or is it just in the background and like, this is what we're striving towards?
It's not necessarily posted on the wall, but it's definitely talked about. And it's talked about every day that we're together, those are the strides we've really been trying to make here in the last 5 years. It's been a long time, looking back on this season. I guess somebody was telling me the other day, it's been like 13, 14 years or something crazy since Iowa State's beat Oklahoma and Oklahoma State in the same year on the same road trip, especially, let alone that, right? So, I mean, that's a big feat in itself. So that's super positive. And then since I've been here, we've kind of gotten waxed by Missouri every time we wrestled them, right? So for us to go in and pull that off is big too. So we have some serious momentum behind us going into this postseason. So, to go into the Big 12 individual tournament and to win that would just be a cherry on top of everything this year. So, that would help. And then you go into the nationals and obviously you're in a whole nother league and looking to go make some noise there too.
Yeah. So I always try to do a little research going into this, and I'm looking stuff up, and then Earl Smith over at Intermat writes the perfect article about you guys. So it says, we celebrate Iowa State today. Turnaround didn't happen overnight. 1-12, the year you guys took over. Dagan was the only guy to follow you guys. Team went 7-10. You signed David Carr. And I like this line. Iowa State staff resisted the urge to throw Carr into the fire and redshirted him during the 1920 campaign. You picked up Nicholas, which really, I think, helped you guys a lot on paper. Like, okay, we've got an AA. The portal is the world these days, for so many reasons. Qualified 9 guys in 20, then the Corona hit, and then you get a national champion last year. Gremmel makes the podium, tied for 13th. So you can see this progress. But like, I went to Iowa State coming out of high school, and that's when Gibbons and my dad was friends with Les Anderson and Harold Nichols. Like, I think people forget there's a ton of tradition at Iowa State, like old school tradition. Like, that's where Gable wrestled. It's like, people, a lot of people don't get that, but like, that's where Gable wrestled. That's where he really became famous first. And I think, I'm interested, it's got to be different. Like, my dad was a really good coach, but nobody cared. Like, there was no pressure at Merrimack to win. Like, if we won or didn't win, like, as long as nobody was, there was no academic fraud or stuff like that. There's different kind of pressure, right? I'm just saying, like, just don't turn in SMU or something like that, but Iowa State, if you don't win, they're going to fire you. That's just it. Like, they want to be good at wrestling. It's like Alabama football, so I'm lucky enough to have interviewed Dresser, interviewed you, interviewed Metcalf. I like Dresser. But I think Dresser reminds me of me. Like, he's very direct. If he doesn't like you, he'll tell you, just like, what was the pressure like? Was when he got offered that job, was it an automatic you were going with him? Kind of walk me through that, because I don't know if anybody's ever talked to you about all
that. So yeah, that was a crazy deal, because I wanted to, if you would have asked me when I took the job there, I went there as the director of ops
at VTech.
Yeah, at VTech. That's okay. Where I started. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I left a coaching position, assistant position at North Dakota State to go there. So if you would have, when I made that transition, you would have told me that Dresser was leaving, especially after being there a year, to go to Iowa State, I would have told you you're crazy, number one. And then then when it did end up happening, it happened kind of fast. I was actually going to the Iowa State tournament because my youngest brother was wrestling. So I was there, and then all of a sudden, all these things started unfolding. He showed up there, was in town because he was obviously going through the discussions with the AD and whatnot. And then somehow, the media slip happens, and all of a sudden, Dresser's like all of a sudden going to Iowa State, right? Or he's taking the job at Iowa State. So I actually ended up I finished that season with Virginia Tech. He took the job actually last week, 5 years ago. So, you finished with you finished with Roby and those guys. I finished with Roby. Yep. So Roby got bumped up, and I was the volunteer at that time. So I actually ended up moving up. Zadok ended up moving up. Yeah. So that kind of how it finished. And then I actually wasn't dead set on, making the commitment to go right away. I was going to give Roby the chance to hear him out. And then, everything kind of unfolded, and it was 2-3 weeks later, I ended up deciding that it was probably going to be a good move for me, and I'm back home. So it's great for me. All my family's close here. So it ended up being kind of an easy transition, but I wasn't dead set. Yeah, I'm necessarily going right out of the chute. But you obviously have loyalty to Dresser. You guys have a good relationship. For people that only see him on the outside, and one of the cool things about this pod for me is that you get a little peek behind the curtain, but nobody shows you everything. And then just part of it is you just have to put your time in, right? You have to be around people every day. You have to earn your stripes. But if you can give us a little peek behind the curtain, what's Dresser like to be with on a daily basis? You know what? As I've worked for, a couple of different people now, but he's unbelievably easy to work for. He's easygoing, gives you a lot of freedom, gives you a lot of input, which is great. You don't feel like it's just you're answering orders all the time, right? No, it's let's sit down, let's talk about this, let's make a plan. So it feels very inclusive. At the end of the day, he is the boss. He's going to make his decision, but I feel very included in the direction of this program, which is awesome. It doesn't just feel like, it's him doing his thing. It's us. We are building this thing, right? So, with that, and then him as a businessman, he's an unbelievable fundraiser, learning those skills. I've learned a heck of a lot from Dresser in that aspect. And, technically everybody, our group of guys, McCaff, him, me, three very different styles. And then we all kind of come together and, make a plan to move forward technically and with our team also. So it's good. Yeah. He's clearly a good leader, right? The proof is in the pudding, right? Everybody will say to somebody, well, hey, this is you either win or you don't win. At the end of the day, when I was working at track, Andy Hamilton said something. He'd never recruited a guy in his life, but he said something that was brilliant. He said, when you recruit, you're either recruiting on hope or results. Yep. And, it's you're either selling a dream, I'm from St. Louis. So it's Mizzou was selling a dream to Ben Askren. They weren't good then. They were okay. They weren't good. They weren't what they are now. They aren't where you got to bring your starters to come win. When I was in high school, Iowa State sent their backups to Missouri. Yep. But they convinced him. Then you have a guy on the Olympic team, you have David Carr, you have junior world champion. Now it's hey, it changes. And that worm can turn very quickly depending on how well you do, right? Yep, and those things take time. Obviously, it's taken us 5 years. I mean, that's not a short amount of time by any means to get where we're at, but it's just, piece by piece, a little block here, a little block there. And that's how you build a good foundation for a program. I'm convinced that when it turns overnight, that you usually don't have a good solid foundation because there's a lot of different pieces. And, the portal, just because you're bringing out all those portal guys in doesn't mean you have a great foundation by any means, right? So I'm a true believer in that. And then, speaking on Dresser's behalf there, everything he's touched is gotten extremely better. He's never gotten that national title yet, but, from his high school programs to his Virginia Tech, what he did there, he built, what were they, like dead last, and he built it into a consistent top 10 program, got first ACC program to get a trophy. That just doesn't happen. And then you come here
right. Yeah, exactly.
To do what he's done here in 5 years. I mean, that's saying something, So the guy knows what he's doing. He knows how to build programs. Hands down.
So one of the things that always struck me about watching you, obviously wrestled for Iowa, 4-time All-American national champion. And I want to say this in the most complimentary possible. Probably not the best athlete, but somebody that got literally probably the most you literally could out of your talent. And I think at the end of the day, when you get old, you go, did I leave anything behind from a lack of effort? If you didn't, however the chips fall, you can sort of live with it, right?
Yeah.
But your personality doesn't seem like, and from the times I've talked to you, from the times I've seen you, like ran into you at the duel a couple of years ago at Mizzou, Iowa State, I understand you're an intense person. You can't have won what you won without finding a switch to flip, but you don't seem like Tom or Terry. You don't seem like Metcalf. Like you feel like, it feels like there's a dial. So for people that want to win, but don't want to be like that 24/7, what advice would you give on like how to find that switch?
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know if it's just something that's in you necessarily or not, but I've been that way my whole life. Like when it's go time, you turn it on, and when you step off, you turn it off. You become a human again, you're just a normal person, happy-go-lucky, loving life person, right? But I don't have a personality like those guys. Never did, and their approach worked for them. It was great. Anytime I ever tried to do that crazy, trying to be respectful here, but like
the riled up version.
Yeah, very much so, right? It never worked for me. Like I never wrestled well trying to be like that, trying to imitate that. So it wasn't going to work for me, right? So always was calm and collected, and a lot of times probably a little bit of a slow starter, but once you get going, those emotions, and the wrestling side of it, kind of go away, and then all of a sudden you're just flowing. The actual wrestling part of it takes over, right? And I wasn't probably what you call the best athlete out there, right? But being in unbelievable shape, being tough, being gritty, having good perspective, and the will to just not take no for an answer will take you a long ways in the sport. And
no. I think how your personality is like in Metcalf, like I think as assistant coach, because this podcast started where we talked to assistant coaches, because I was an assistant coach, and I felt like, one, assistant coaches will tell you more. Usually they're younger, they haven't taken all the media classes yet, like they'll tell you more of the truth. But like I could see athlete A on your team relating a lot more to you, and athlete B relating a lot more to Metcalf. Yeah. And having somebody that they feel like this guy fits my personality, like the other person would have to go, hey man, you should talk to him. Like he sort of vibes with you better.
Yeah. And you run into that quite a bit. And I think that's where it's good to have a variety of people. It's not necessarily the best way to do it is to just have a one mindset or one way to do things. And I think that's where Dresser does a great job too. Again, was bringing in a variety of people. Like we have Nate Carr here. We have Fernando Villascusa, who's from Arizona, had several really good high school programs down there. We got Kyvan still here. We brought in Joe Plume. We brought in all these other people that come from completely different walks of life, different wrestling backgrounds, and we put our heads together. So then when you talk about building a team like we have here, we have kids from all over the world, all over the country. I mean, we have a wide variety of characters on this program, and, you know, coming from different cultures. I mean, and then you put all those things together, it really gives you a unique program also.
I remember there was a Division I head coach the year we recruited like Jamel Jones, Deron Wynn, Senzi, and like this coach pulled me aside because I'd recruited all of them. He goes, David, this is going to be the most. We used to have some good kids, like kids that took like third or fourth at state. And the only challenge then, I mean, some of them you had to keep them from like trying to grow weed in their apartment, but for the most part, it was just trying to make them better because they weren't very good.
Yeah.
You know, like they weren't good enough like then to be top 8 in the junior college nationals. You got these kids now, and those are like, they're like, it's like, you got to coach them differently. You can't just tell them what to do. Like you have to let them have some buy-in. Like they have to feel like they're a part of the process. I learned that, and it was different. You know, it was very different. You know, when you are a part of like the Iowa program, you know, part of Virginia Tech, part of this program, for coaches that are trying to get on the come up, because you have to kind of change. That's what I felt. So I'm interested. Do you agree with that? How do you see it?
I do, for the most part. I do agree with that. I think you got to be flexible. It isn't just your way or the highway. At least for me, I have a very, probably still what most people would consider old school approach to the sport and just wrestling in general and life, probably to a fault, maybe even a little bit. But I think, you know, if you can find that middle ground and you can get them to come your way, you go their way a little bit, you can meet in the middle. I think it ends up being the best thing for the individual and for you also. You know, we've had, you know, especially where we came from, guys had to kind of come our way quite a bit, and we never ran anybody out of this program. In the first year, we had like 17 or 18 kids leave, and we never asked a single one of them or tell a single one of them that it's time to move on. But when you set the expectation and you live that lifestyle and you do the things that you're preaching every day, I think kids see that. And then once the kids that do buy in start having success, it's like a waterfall. The kids, everybody wants to have a piece of that, right? So I think that's where if you can build that base or that good foundation, you know, those things it kind of steamrolls, and you can persuade it however you need to or want to also.
Yeah. The other, I guess, to almost contradict myself, I heard somebody say a long time ago, I heard Jordan Burroughs say this, was champions crave structure, right? Like, I think like maybe like once a month, a guy could walk into practice and coach goes, I don't know, what do you want to do today? Like once a month, that's probably okay, depending on the season, right? But like if every day, like I'll just pick David Carr because he's the most famous guy on your team, and he looks at dressers, like, I don't know, what do you want to do? Like after about a week, you're like, I don't know, man, you're the coach. Like, aren't you supposed to tell me?
He's probably the best example of that. You know, he is growing up 100-fold since he's been here. You know, he's just his toughness and the way he approaches the sport. He's always loved the sport, right?
Yeah.
But the way he approaches it now and the drive that he has changed a ton, right? And I think that's helped him make the leaps that he's made. Not that he wasn't a great wrestler to begin with, but, you know, if he ever wants to go contend for multiple national titles and he wants to compete for world and Olympic titles, that's the way he's going to have to approach it. And what he's doing right now is great and is a good example for the rest of our team also. He's a great leader in that aspect.
To me, he's interesting because like I've known his dad. We coached against his brother in junior college. You know, like I said, I'm from Iowa State. My dad used to take us up there every year for the Midwest Open and all that stuff. But he was so good. Sometimes guys that are really good don't have to be gritty, to use a word you used earlier.
Yeah.
But like Jordan Burroughs, I think one of the things that people don't give him enough credit for, like, oh, he's just athletic and he's fast. And, you know, like that guy's got some dog in him. And I mean that as a huge compliment. Like he's got some dog in him. Like, you know, you're not going to take this food off my table kind of guy. And it feels like David, go ahead.
Yeah, he's got that. You know, when he first got here, you know, when I'd wrestle with him or my brother would wrestle with him and people would start getting maybe tough with him a little bit, Metcalf even, kind of put his head down and kind of take it a little bit. And then, you know, after you have that happen to you a couple of times, you got to make the decision of either you're going to get up and you're going to fight back and you're going to do this and you're going to do it right, or you're just going to continue to take your whoopings and go lick your wounds in the corner, and you're not going to have the success that you probably want, right? And there's some guys that can do that, but they're probably the anomaly, right? Like there's some guys that can do that, kind of tiptoe through practice and take their whoopings and then just
Not
show
for
up.
very long, right? Yeah.
But yeah, it usually doesn't work like that, right? There's always
Yeah.
the exception to the rule. But you know, he's completely 180 that. I mean, that dude, you give him a hard cuff, he's gonna come back and he's gonna give it right back. And that's what this team needed and he needed personally. So he's got that fight in him. He's got that grit.
The best wrestlers are leaders, whether they want to be or not. I think like that's something kids don't always embrace. You know, like we had a kid on our team, you know, junior college, a lot of these kids, you know, let's put it this way. If you had a 4.0 and a 34 on the ACT and you won Fargo and won state 4 times and never got in any trouble, you wouldn't be going to junior college. So, you know, I would tell these guys, I'm like, hey, you won all this. They're going to look up to you. So now it's just which version, what kind of person do you want to be that they're looking up to you?
Yeah. And there's different kinds of leaders, you know, there's extremely vocal leaders and there's leaders by example, by doing all the right things and maybe don't have to say as much, you know. And that's kind of the way I always approach it is I want to be the leader by example. I didn't, you know, I grab people and put my arm around them and teammates, whatnot, and, you know, help coach them up and give them some positive reinforcement. But I was never really one back then to stand up in front of the team and hoorah, you know, blow whistles and light off fireworks by any means. But there's definitely some guys that are really good at that. And David Carr is probably a really good mix of both also.
Well, and it feels like you are more of the lead by example, and I don't. Metcalf was obviously a great example, but he was also the guy I would think if you guys were having a terrible practice would turn the radio down and scream at everybody and go, you know, what the hell are we doing, kind of thing.
Yeah, you know that never really probably necessarily happened by any means, but he was definitely has more of the personality of that approach for sure.
You know what's interesting is it feels like, again, watching from the outside, because when we did the podcast with you guys a couple of years ago at the Agony at Ames, you know, and I did it with a buddy of mine. We did it in person. And I think Brent was just short because he was trying to be in 9 places at once. But, you know, like, you know, but you were like very understanding and he wasn't. And since then, I feel like my relationship with him has gotten better. And I don't think I've changed. I think he's changed. Yeah. You know, and you know, and like I said, you know, when I just have to do one thing and he has to do 9, I've been the guy that has to do 9, like the day of my charity events. And it's like, bro, can you just say what you need to say so I can go to the next thing? Yeah, but it feels like him coaching these guys, like him doing the thing after nationals with David Carr. I doesn't feel like 10 years ago, Brent Metcalf would have ever done that, would have ever let himself be thrown. And then, you know, like I texted you after the duel when he's doing this to Younger, like, don't throw the headgear. Like, do you see an evolution in him? Because, I mean, you're around him every day, or is it more like a kid growing an inch or two and it's so close to it, you don't see it?
You know, we've been around each other for a long time. You know, he was a senior when I was a true freshman. So we have all that overlap, right? Where he was still competing internationally and it was in the room same time I was. So we have had an interesting probably relationship then. It was, you know, very much like competitive in the room, right? And he had a family, and so he was doing that thing, and I was, you know, living the college life, doing my thing. So we were never like close by any means, right? But we were competitors in the practice room, and we couldn't hardly step on the mat without punching each other in the head or freaking pulling shirts over each other's heads or, you know, tearing sleeves off t-shirts, you know, that kind of mentality. So, the evolution of our relationship been kind of crazy. You know, we weren't close by any means before we both took this job too. So me knowing him from that time and then him taking this job and seeing him, you know, from my perspective, seeing him, you know, evolve as a coach has been kind of crazy, you know, and he's changed a lot and probably his approach to the sport too. kind of more backed off, like you said, and he's not a short person at all. Like he'd give you the time of day. He'd sit and have a half-hour conversation with you. So
yeah,
well, it's his approach, I would say, to coaching is a lot different than probably what he was maybe taught or his approach as an athlete, I would say.
yeah.
That makes
Well,
sense.
again, like nobody ever wants to be judged on their worst day, and nobody probably really wants to be judged on their best day because that's a high standard to keep up.
Yeah.
He's been more than kind, more than gracious, and like all you guys, you're super. I use this term intellectually generous, which I appreciate because the whole point of this podcast is just like if we were sitting around watching the UFC at a bar and somebody just slipped a microphone in between us and happened to listen and hear some cool stuff, So, but it's really more of that. But he did tell me a crazy story, which, and we'll leave it, but how he was driving up to USA Wrestling to take that job when the whole Iowa State thing happened. So people should go back and listen to that. So you guys we got about 5 minutes left. You got Big 12s, you got NCAAs. When we were coaching this time of the year, it was not a lot of live work. It was a lot of shorter goes. It was a lot of one-on-ones. It was a lot of getting guys' minds right, getting them confident if their bodies need to rest. Has that changed, or is that still kind of the formula?
For us, it's keeping it short and sweet, keeping guys healthy, sharpening things up, finding that edge. Our team, we have that. I feel like we have a really good foundation, that base shape. Technically, that base, technical aspects is done. It's just about fine tuning some things, working in some positions with guys, and then, stepping out there and going out there and showcasing, them guys showcasing themselves. So hopefully, they're ready to go when they step on the mat. And once they step on the mat, the work's done. You just sit back and try to not let them maybe get screwed by the refs or this, that, or the next thing, right? So
be good with the brick.
Good
with the brick. Like it's funny because when I coached, like there's a ton of things and like when I'm doing play-by-play, like there was one Friday night, I'm like, that's a terrible brick. And like they reviewed it for like 7 seconds. I'm like, you almost need somebody that doesn't care about your team, like zapping you, like don't do like it, like that's watching it, like, no, don't do that,
the brick's interesting. The brick's always interesting. And now the aspect of refs maybe taking the personal ones too.
The self-review, yeah.
Yeah, throws a kink in it too. So that's all right. You continue to develop it and figure out what works best. But I think a lot of those refs do a great job for the most part.
They're all trying, right? They're like coaches. Like, people get on refs. I'm like, if you ever coached, there's no chance you yelled everything right for 9 hours in a tournament. Like there's either something you yelled that was wrong or something you should have yelled. It's just nobody hears that, like nobody hears that.
I have none but the utmost respect for those guys. And that's a tough job. You're never gonna win at that position, so.
Yeah. And these are the guys and gals that really love the sport because it's a thankless job. Like the best thing you can do as a referee is like somebody goes at the end of the day, who is the ref? You're like, if that's the high point, then you got your heart in the right place for sure.
It's a tough job when you even hear them mumble under their breath, why in the hell am I still doing this? So, it's a tough job on that.
You heard that, huh?
Well, I've heard that before, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so, I'm reading this article. The journey has got to be great. Like you got to actually, the first year you go to the Big 12s, you're like, we're going to get our teeth kicked in, right? Like, you hope not, but realistic, you're like, this is going to be a long 2 days. You guys got a very realistic chance of winning the tournament, right?
Yeah, I think so. Doesn't matter what I think, though. It's about what our guys think and what our guys believe. And we're going to have them ready to go. So I hope they're on board 100%. I feel like we got an unbelievable chance to do it. Yeah. And I don't know when the last time Iowa State's won a Big 12 title is, but I feel like it's been a while.
It's been a historic year in a lot of cases, like you guys winning it. The amount of duels that Oklahoma State has lost in a year. Last year, that tournament, we did the scramble cam for it, and it came down to the finals and ended up being a tie between OU and OSU, which nobody would have picked OU, but they're just pinning dudes like crazy on the back. Yeah. And you and Wyoming were right in there, like really going into the finals, you were mathematically still alive. A bunch of things would have had to go right. And I feel like it's going to be that way this year with you. I would say you, Oklahoma State, and Mizzou are all going to be mathematically in it going into the finals. I would be shocked if somebody's locked it up.
Yeah, you got to keep your guys on the front side as much as you can. And then you slip and you fall in the wet spot, man. You got to buck up and get 2 minutes to go paddle about it or slam some chairs or do whatever you need to do. And then go put your straps up and come back and get third. That's the
And get bonus on the way back, right?
Yeah, that helps even more.
Yeah. Yeah. Those bonus points on the backside when guys injury default out, those make a monster difference. And people don't really think about that.
Yeah. And that's been a difference for us in a couple of those duels this year. So,
yeah. When these duels go 5-5, that's the next criteria, right? Like people changing it from 7 to 8 and 14 to 15. So look, I don't want to take any more of your time. I truly appreciate you just as a person. You're always, you see like some guys, like you actually wave and say hi and that kind of stuff. And it says a lot about who you are. Good luck. Good luck to Allie. Their teams they got to be wrestling here soon, right?
Oh, I think they have conference this weekend and then their nationals are like a week and a half after that too.
Yeah. So Grant Turner's on our other podcast. So I know all about Grandview's schedule. Yeah. But tell her, I remember watching her in high school at the Granite City tournament, which is like 25 minutes from my house, like put a kid in therapy. So I was like,
she must be a wrecker then, because I would hate to be with that poor little boy that got beat up by the girl.
It was tough. And, back then it wasn't accepted as much. I mean, now it's different. Back then it was like, yeah. So anyway, well, listen, best of luck to you, Kevin, Brent, the whole crew, and I'll be down there. I'll see you probably in 12 days. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Thank everybody for watching, listening, and sharing. See y'all next week.